They say the workplace is like a second home. You spend hours there every day, share laughs over coffee, vent frustrations during lunch, and sometimes you even trust your coworkers more than your own family. But what happens when one of those coworkers betrays you not by mistake, but intentionally? That's exactly what happened to Daniel, a hardworking project manager in a mid-sized tech company in Chicago. Daniel was the kind of guy everyone respected. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he always delivered. He came in on time, stayed late if the project demanded it, and had this way of making even the most complicated tasks seem manageable. If the team was struggling, he was the first to lend a hand. If someone was falling behind, he would stay after hours to help them catch up. But, of course, not everyone admired Daniel. Meet Kevin. Kevin had been with the company for less than a year, and though he was smart, he lacked patience. He wanted recognition fast, and he wanted promotions even faster. The problem? Daniel was in the way. Management often praised Daniel for his leadership. When big clients came in, Daniel was the one who presented. When the CEO needed updates, Daniel was the guy he called. Kevin hated it. He couldn't stand seeing Daniel earn respect that he felt he deserved. And so, the seeds of jealousy started to grow. At first, Kevin tried harmless things, subtle digs at Daniel during meetings, undermining his ideas, rolling his eyes when Daniel spoke. But when those little things didn't get him the attention he wanted, Kevin decided to go bigger. One afternoon, as Daniel left the office early to pick up his daughter from school, Kevin saw his chance. Their team had been working on a huge presentation for a $1 million client. Daniel had put weeks of effort into preparing the report. It was his responsibility, but the files were saved on the shared company drive. Kevin copied the files, edited out Daniel's name, and added his own. Then, when the meeting day arrived, Kevin accidentally emailed the presentation to the CEO ahead of time, claiming he had been the one working on it all along. When Daniel walked into the conference room the next morning, he felt something was off. The CEO shook Kevin's hand, complimenting him on the excellent work. The client smiled and said, "We're impressed, Kevin." Daniel froze. His heart sank as he realized his work, his late nights, his weekends away from family was being stolen right in front of him. But Daniel wasn't the type to create a scene. He sat quietly, clenched his jaw, and let the meeting continue. He knew he needed to be smart about this. After the meeting, Daniel went back to his desk and started gathering proof. He had email trails, saved drafts, and timestamps showing his work. He even had sticky notes and sketches in his office that matched the slides. He didn't rush to the CEO. Instead, he waited. And karma was about to show up in the best way. 2 weeks later, the client requested some updates to the presentation. Nothing too major, just a few technical clarifications. The CEO called Kevin in, expecting him to handle it since he had done the original work. Kevin panicked. He had no idea how to answer. He stammered, deflected, and asked for more time. The CEO was puzzled. That's when Daniel stepped in. Calmly, he said, "I think I can help clarify that." Within minutes, Daniel explained the technical details flawlessly. The client nodded, satisfied. The CEO, however, wasn't. He narrowed his eyes at Kevin. The following day, the CEO called both men into his office. He asked Kevin to explain the discrepancies. Kevin tried to bluff, but Daniel, without raising his voice, placed the evidence on the desk: emails, drafts, time logs, everything. The room fell silent. The CEO looked at Kevin with disappointment. "You not only lied to me, but you tried to take credit for someone else's work. That's not just dishonest, it's dangerous for the company." Within hours, Kevin was escorted out of the building, fired, just like that. But the story didn't end there. A month later, Word got around that Kevin had applied to several other firms in the industry. And guess what? The CEO personally called some of those companies, warning them about Kevin's behavior. His reputation was ruined. No one wanted to take a risk on a dishonest employee. Meanwhile, Daniel's honesty and patience paid off. The CEO publicly apologized to him in front of the entire company, acknowledging his hard work. Daniel was promoted to senior project manager and given a significant bonus. The lesson? Kevin thought he could cheat his way to success, but karma had other plans. His greed and jealousy destroyed him, while Daniel's integrity lifted him higher than ever before. So, the next time you feel tempted to betray someone just to get ahead, remember this. You might win for a day, maybe even a week, but karma always strikes back. The wedding day secret. Weddings are supposed to be magical. They're a celebration of love, trust, and the beginning of a new chapter. But sometimes behind the sparkling dresses, the elegant flowers, and the carefully planned vows, lies a darker truth, one that not everyone sees until it's too late. This is the story of Emily and Jake. Emily was the kind of woman who dreamed about her wedding since she was a little girl. She wasn't shallow about it. It wasn't just about the white dress or the fancy cake. For her, it was about commitment, a lifelong promise. She met Jake during her sophomore year at college. He was charming, funny, and had that easy confidence that drew people in. They dated for nearly 6 years before Jake finally proposed. For Emily, it felt like the dream was finally becoming reality. She spent months planning everything: the perfect venue in Vermont, a rustic barn filled with twinkling fairy lights, flowers flown in from California, and a guest list of 200 family and friends. Everything was set for what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But just 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily received a message that shattered her world. It came from an unknown number. At first, she thought it was spam, but curiosity made her open it. The message read, "You don't know me, but you should know what Jake has been doing. Check your email." Heart pounding, Emily rushed to her laptop. There, in her inbox, was an email from the same sender. Attached were screenshots texts between Jake and another woman. The messages weren't vague. They were explicit. Plans for meetups, declarations of affection, and worst of all, comments about how he wasn't even sure he wanted to go through with the wedding. Emily's world came crashing down. 6 years of love, trust, and dreams, all betrayed. She cried for hours, her heart breaking with every thought. But when the tears finally stopped, something else replaced the pain: anger, and then resolve. Emily wasn't going to call off the wedding. She wasn't going to run away. No, she was going to give Jake exactly what he wanted: a wedding he'd never forget. The big day arrived. Guests filled the barn. Music played softly in the background, and Jake stood at the altar, looking every bit the confident groom. Emily walked down the aisle, her face serene, her dress shimmering under the golden lights. To anyone watching, she looked like the happiest bride alive, but inside, she was holding back a storm. When it came time for vows, Jake went first. He spoke about love, loyalty, and forever. His words were sweet, rehearsed, and dripping with lies. Emily smiled, but her heart was racing. Then it was her turn. She held Jake's hands, looked into his eyes, and began. "Jake, when I met you, I thought I had found the man I could trust for the rest of my life. Someone who would be honest, faithful, and true. But standing here today, in front of everyone we love, I realize I was wrong." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jake's smile faltered. Emily continued, her voice strong. "You see, Jake hasn't just been planning a life with me. He's been planning late nights with someone else. He's been sending her messages, telling her things he should only tell his bride-to-be." The crowd fell into stunned silence. Jake's face turned pale. He stammered, "Emily, What are you doing? Emily didn't flinch. She reached into her bouquet and pulled out her phone. With a steady hand, she read aloud a few of the text messages Jake had sent to the other woman. Murmurs spread across the room. Guests covered their mouths in shock. Jake's parents bowed their heads in shame. Finally, Emily said, I may have lost 6 years of my life to your lies, but today I reclaim my dignity. This wedding is over. She dropped the bouquet, turned around, and walked out of the barn with her head held high. Jake tried to follow her, but before he could, Emily's brother stepped forward, blocking his path. You've done enough, he said firmly. Jake stood frozen, humiliated, while 200 guests whispered about the groom, who had been exposed on his own wedding day. And here's where karma stepped in. Within weeks, Emily's story spread like wildfire. Friends shared it. Coworkers whispered about it, and soon, even local news outlets picked it up. Jake's reputation was destroyed. The woman he had been cheating with, she dumped him too, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Meanwhile, Emily found support everywhere. Strangers reached out to tell her how brave she had been. She started focusing on herself, traveling, picking up hobbies she had long abandoned, and slowly she began to heal. A year later, she met someone new, a man who treated her with the honesty and respect she had always deserved. Jake, on the other hand, couldn't escape the shadow of his actions. Every date, every job interview, every social gathering, someone always remembered the groom who got exposed at his wedding. The lesson? Cheating may give you temporary thrills, but the truth always comes out. And when it does, karma doesn't just knock, it kicks down the door. The landlord's greed. If you've ever rented an apartment, you know how stressful it can be. The endless paperwork, the security deposits, the strict rules, and, of course, the landlords. Some are decent, fair, and genuinely helpful, but others, they're greedy, manipulative, and see their tenants as nothing more than walking dollar signs. This is the story of one such landlord and how karma made sure he got exactly what he deserved. Maya was a single MOM living in a small town just outside of Boston. She worked 2 jobs, one as a cashier at the grocery store and another cleaning houses on weekends. Life wasn't easy, but she did everything she could to give her 7-year-old son, Liam, a safe and happy home. Their apartment wasn't fancy. It was an old 2-bedroom place with creaky floors and outdated appliances. But to Maya and Liam, it was home. The rent took up almost half of Maya's paycheck, but she managed to pay on time every month. She never caused trouble, never complained, and always followed the rules. Her landlord, however, was a different story. Mr. Collins owned several properties in town. On the surface, he was well-dressed and polite, but anyone who rented from him knew the truth. He was greedy, always looking for ways to squeeze more money out of his tenants. If the rent was late by even a single day, he slapped on huge late fees. If something broke in the apartment, like the leaky faucet or the broken heater, he dragged his feet on repairs, but had no problem raising the rent whenever he felt like it. Maya did her best to stay on his good side, but one winter, things came to a boiling point. It was one of the coldest winters in years. Snow piled up outside, and the temperatures dropped below freezing. Maya's heater broke down, leaving her and Liam shivering in their apartment. She called Mr. Collins immediately. Please, we need heat. My son is getting sick. But Collins brushed her off. I'll send someone when I can. You know these things take time. Days passed, and no one showed up. Maya had to wrap Liam in blankets, heat water on the stove, and pray they wouldn't get frostbite. Finally, she threatened to report him to the housing authority. That's when Collins snapped. Instead of fixing the heater, he served her with an eviction notice. His excuse? You'd been late on rent before, which wasn't true. Maya had the receipts to prove it. But Collins knew most tenants didn't have the resources to fight back. He assumed she'd pack up and leave quietly. After all, she was just a single MOM working paycheck to paycheck. Who would believe her over a respectable property owner? But this time, he underestimated her. Maya was furious, but she stayed calm. She gathered every rent receipt, every text, every voicemail she'd ever exchanged with him. She documented the broken heater, took photos of the apartment's poor condition, and even got a doctor's note showing Liam had developed bronchitis from the freezing temperatures. Then she reached out to the local tenants association for help. They connected her with a lawyer who specialized in tenant rights and who had been waiting for a chance to take Collins down. When Collins tried to take her to court for eviction, Maya came prepared. The judge listened as Collins smugly argued that she had been irresponsible and constantly late on payments. Then Maya handed over her evidence. The room went silent as the judge flicked through her receipts, every single one showing payments made on time. She showed the photos of the broken heater, the icy windows, the doctor's note for Liam, and then the lawyer revealed something even worse. Collins had been illegally raising rents without filing proper paperwork. The judge's expression hardened. In a matter of minutes, the tables turned. Not only was Collins' eviction order thrown out, but he was also fined heavily for violating housing codes. He was ordered to refund tenants thousands of dollars in illegal rent increases and forced to make immediate repairs to all his properties. And the cherry on top, news of the case spread. Local reporters picked up the story, exposing Collins as the greedy slumlord he really was. His reputation in the town crumbled. Tenants who had been afraid to speak out before now came forward with their own complaints, and soon he was drowning in lawsuits. Meanwhile, Maya and Liam stayed in their apartment with a brand new heater, courtesy of the court order. For the first time in years, she felt safe, empowered. She had stood up not just for herself, but for every tenant Collins had taken advantage of. The lesson? Greed might fill your pockets for a while, but sooner or later, karma will find a way to balance the scales. Collins thought he could bully a struggling single MOM. Instead, her courage and persistence brought his entire empire crashing down. The friendship betrayal. There's a special kind of pain that comes from being betrayed by a friend. Lovers come and go. Jobs change. Even family ties can strain, but a friend is supposed to be your safe place. The one person who stands by you when the world turns cold. That's why betrayal from a friend cuts deeper than almost anything else. And this story, it's about betrayal, revenge, and the sweet taste of karma when it finally struck back. Sophie and Claire had been best friends since middle school. They were inseparable. Sleepovers, matching outfits, sharing secrets late at night. They were more like sisters than friends. By the time they reached their 20s, they still leaned on each other for everything. Sophie was the quiet, hard-working one, while Claire was more outgoing, bold, and a little reckless. When Sophie got her first real job after college, she was ecstatic. It wasn't glamorous. She worked as a junior accountant at a small firm, but it was steady, and it came with decent pay and benefits. Claire, meanwhile, bounced between jobs and lived paycheck to paycheck. She often leaned on Sophie for help borrowing money here and there, crashing on her couch after bad breakups, or using Sophie's car when hers broke down. Sophie never minded. That's what friends were for, right? But little by little, the friendship started to tilt. Claire was charming and fun, but she had a selfish streak Sophie often ignored. She flirted with Sophie's dates, borrowed clothes without asking, and sometimes talked down to her in front of others. Sophie brushed it off, telling herself Claire didn't mean any harm. Then came the betrayal that shattered everything. Sophie had been dating a guy named Daniel for almost a year. He was kind, stable, and seemed genuinely interested in building a future with her. It was the happiest Sophie had ever been, and she often confided in Claire about her feelings. Claire acted supportive, always asking questions, always smiling. But behind the scenes, Claire had her own agenda. One night, Sophie had to work late at the firm. Daniel was supposed to pick her up afterward, but he didn't show. He didn't answer his phone either. Worried, Sophie went straight to his apartment only to find Claire's jacket hanging on the chair. Her stomach dropped. She opened the bedroom door and found them together. Her best friend, her boyfriend. The betrayal cut like glass. Daniel stammered excuses. Claire smirked, and Sophie stood frozen, her world collapsing. For weeks afterward, Sophie felt like a ghost. She could barely eat, barely sleep. At work, she put on a brave face, but inside, she was shattered. Claire didn't even apologize. In fact, she flaunted her new relationship with Daniel on social media, posting pictures and captions like, "When you find the real one, you just know." People in their circle whispered. Some pitied Sophie. Others secretly admired Claire's audacity. But Sophie wasn't weak. She was quiet, observant, and patient. And as much as it hurt, she knew one thing. Karma always comes around. And sometimes it just needs a little push. A few months later, Sophie found her chance. At work, she had access to financial records for several clients. One of them, the small boutique where Claire had recently started working as a manager. Sophie wasn't the type to abuse her job, but when she noticed discrepancies in the boutique's accounts, suspicious charges, missing receipts, her curiosity was piqued. It didn't take long to figure it out. Claire had been embezzling money from the boutique, small amounts at first, then larger sums. She was using the money to take Daniel on weekend trips, buy herself designer bags, and live a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Sophie could have gone straight to the police, but she wanted Claire to feel the sting of betrayal the same way she had. So she waited. She documented everything, every missing cent, every forged receipt, every false entry. Then, when the timing was perfect, she anonymously sent the evidence to the boutique's owner. The fallout was explosive. Claire was fired immediately. The owner pressed charges, and suddenly, Claire wasn't flaunting her life on Instagram anymore. She was scrambling to find a lawyer. Daniel, who had been enjoying the luxury trips and expensive gifts, quickly bailed when he realized the money was stolen. He ghosted her completely, leaving her to face the consequences alone. And Sophie, she never said a word. She didn't need to. Watching Claire's perfect little world crumble was enough. Months later, Sophie ran into Claire at a CAF. Claire looked tired, worn down, nothing like the glamorous girl who once stole her boyfriend. She tried to start a conversation, maybe even apologize, but Sophie just smiled politely, picked up her coffee, and walked away. Because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge of all. The lesson? When you betray a friend, you don't just lose a relationship, you lose a part of yourself. Claire thought she could lie, cheat, and steal her way into happiness. But in the end, her greed and selfishness caught up to her. Sophie didn't have to scream or fight. She simply waited and let karma do the rest. The firm had a huge opportunity with a Fortune 500 client, a deal that could make careers. Alex spent weeks building the pitch, researching markets, designing strategies, crafting presentations. It was his masterpiece. The night before the presentation, Richard called him into his office. "Alex," he said smoothly, "I need you to trust me with this. I'll be the one delivering the pitch tomorrow. Don't worry, you'll get your recognition when the time is right." Alex hesitated, but he didn't argue. He'd been a team player for years. Surely, this time, Richard would acknowledge his hard work. The next morning, Alex sat in the back of the boardroom as Richard presented. Slide after slide, word for word, it was Alex's work. And when the client applauded and signed the deal, Richard smiled like he'd painted the Mona Lisa himself. Not once did he mention Alex's name. That's when Alex realized Richard wasn't just ambitious. He was a thief, and if Alex didn't fight back, he'd be stuck in Richard's shadow forever. Over the next few months, Alex quietly observed. He noticed Richard's patterns taking credit for other people's work, overpromising to clients, hiding failures by blaming subordinates. Everyone knew Richard was slimy, but nobody dared cross him. Alex, however, wasn't going to wait for karma. He was going to become calmer. He began keeping records, emails, messages, meeting notes. Every time Richard lied, every time he twisted the truth, Alex saved proof. At the same time, Alex started building alliances with colleagues Richard had burned in the past. Quietly, strategically, he turned Richard's victims into his supporters. The breaking point came with another big client. Richard promised results the team couldn't deliver. When the campaign flopped, Richard was ready to throw Alex under the bus in front of the board. But Alex was ready. In that boardroom, as Richard began his usual blame-shifting speech, Alex calmly stood up. "Actually," he said, his voice steady, "I think the board deserves the full picture." Then he presented everything: emails, timelines, client communications. Slide after slide showed that Richard had ignored warnings, made reckless promises, and stolen credit. Alex didn't embellish. He didn't attack, he simply laid out the truth. The room went silent. Richard tried to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. The board dismissed him on the spot. And then they turned to Alex. "You've clearly been carrying this team," one executive said. "How would you like to lead it?" Just like that, Alex got the promotion Richard had dangled over him for years. Richard's downfall was swift. His reputation tanked in the industry, and no respectable firm wanted to touch him. Word spread quickly. He wasn't a visionary. He was a fraud. Alex, on the other hand, thrived. With Richard gone, the firm flourished under his honest leadership. Colleagues respected him. Clients trusted him. And for the first time in years, Alex felt truly seen.